I think it's just something different. I mean, there's a lot of truckers around, but they're mostly doing highway and stuff, and this ice road trucking is just something that's not on anybody's radar.
They drive on ice roads, not paved roads. The river is frozen. One crack could mean life or death. Over the course of several seasons, we've seen nerves of steel fight in the Arctic. But things were very tense behind the cameras. Here is a list of the 5 truckers Lisa Kelly had the most trouble with and why. Let's start the story. 5. Hugh Rowland, who was better known as Polar Bear, was without a doubt the king of the ice roads. He was one of the first people to appear on the show. Hugh had worked on Canadian roads for a long time and knew a lot about them. He seemed like an old guard, maybe because he was tough, had a lot of experience, or was very wary of people who he didn't think had earned their place yet. Lisa Kelly was just a young woman from Alaska when she came into his life. Even back then, you could tell that 2 worlds were about to collide. There was so much stress that anyone could cut it with a knife. It had nothing to do with experience and everything to do with respect. After many years, Lisa talked about this strain in an interview. When asked what it was like to be one of the few women in the field, she said that Hugh Rowland made her feel bad because he was rude and critical. It was too much for Lisa to handle this attitude. She knew she had to fight back in order to live her life. It seemed like she could only turn insults into jokes if she fought back. There was a long fight for respect, and many experienced truckers quit during the 2nd season of Ice Road Truckers. Lisa and Hugh were left together and had to go on Bolivia's famous Death Road by themselves. This time, they couldn't get away from the stress, and they were in a dangerous place with many crumbling cliffs. Their fight was stewing under a lot of stress, and their personal and professional differences finally met on the world's most risky road. Their rivalry was caused by differences in both their personal and work lives. The battle lines were more clear than ever when Season 7 of The Shoe came back to Canada. Lisa worked as a driver for the new company Polar Industries, and Hugh became a co-owner of VP Express, a competitor. Not only did they dislike each other, but they were now also directly competing for loads, money, and even the right to talk. It was safe to say that their fight was brutal, and in one memorable show, it was all laid out for everyone to see. Hugh's bosses didn't bother him when they heard that Hire Art Burke had a breakdown hundreds of miles away in Winnipeg. It was a harsh reminder of how tough life was on the ice, where being polite wasn't something everyone could afford. Lisa Kelly and Hugh Rowland's fights were never really solved by shaking hands or saying sorry. Instead, it got bigger as time went on. Lisa thought it began with personal insult and turned into a full-on war within the company. But this fight had effects on her work because she had to deal with constant opposition. Lisa stayed strong through it all. She always stood up for herself and never gave up, even if it was against the most scary and well-known character on the show. Lisa Kelly knew how to drive and fight well. Every time someone spoke back to her, she had a response ready. She moved carefully with each load she brought. In a way, it was a way for her to show disrespect for her competitor's business, which made her more well-known among fans. She had worked hard to get where she was in the business, and she wasn't just surviving the ice. She was also beating everything it stood for. Hugh Rowland was an institutional barrier at the time. He sounded like something from the past and told her she didn't fit. She didn't back down, though, and that helped her find her place on the road. Lisa has talked about that time in other conversations. They never hit each other, but she made it clear that they didn't agree. She made it sound like working with him was hard, especially since the cameras made every argument sound worse. In general, they never really got personal when they disagreed. They were mostly competitive. For each driver, the stakes got higher as the show became more popular, so each episode was a chance to show what kind of person, skill, or toughness you had. It might have been hard for Hugh, who had been a main character since the first season, to share the stage with a young female driver who had what it took to make it big. There were some bad times in the relationship, but it wasn't all bad. There were times when they respected each other, and there were times when Lisa proved herself in the worst situations. Hugh Rowland was a big part of Lisa Kelly's journey, even though the competition never went away completely. During their time on the ice, they fought, respected each other, and fell out. Even though he wasn't the friendliest trucker, he kept trying her to see if she really belonged on the ice, which made her stronger. Rick Yem is number 4. It was 2010 when the Ice Road Truckers Company made the choice to end it all. But the spin-off was something else. Lisa Kelly, Rick Yem, and Alex Debegorsky were sent to the Himalayas to drive on the world's most dangerous mountain roads in Ice Road Truckers' deadliest roads. The task was really tough and out of this world. It had crazy traffic and one-lane cliffs that were falling apart. These were called cutouts. Also, there were 1,000-foot drops with no guardrails. The fastest people really did make it through on the ice. It would also start a fight between Lisa and Rick Yem, another warrior, that would last for years. The stress on the show was felt by everyone who saw it, and the drivers also had a hard time with it. But the worst of the impact happened after 2 years. And in an interview in 2012, Rick Yem made a lot of false claims about Lisa Kelly. He made up a story that was against everything Lisa stood for. He made her look like a diva instead of the brave driver that people loved watching on TV. Yem said, "Maybe I'm not as smart as Lisa in that way, but I'm not a superstar or anything." The game was tough, so she hires a manager to handle all of her fights. If she doesn't want to drive, he tells them she won't, and she stays at the hotel. Yem had more to say than that. He then made the most damaging claim, which hurt her bravery and skill. He told her that he knew she wasn't driving 90% of the time. He told her she wouldn't drive if things got dangerous for everyone. He even made fun of her and another driver named G.W. Bowles to a driving contest where production wouldn't get in the way, so they could see who the people the show made really are. It was clear that Yem didn't like Kelly. He thought he was cast as the jerk while Lisa was made to look like the hero. He said, "I was the only one who went to India without any problems. There was no accident, scratch, ding, or anything else." Was that shown on TV? Not at all. That's not how I act. The problem with this shocking claim was that it went against everything that was shown on the show. Face Your Fears is the title of episode 3, which shows Lisa facing her fear of the ledge, a narrow path on a cliff that made her worry and quit a previous run. She drives it again on purpose to get over her fear, even though a flat tire leaves her wobbling on the edge of a cliff. But the most clear and straight answer to Yem's claims was in Explosive Cargo, the last episode of the season. The last and most dangerous job was to bring unstable jet fuel up the dangerous Ru Tang Pass to help rescue teams who were stuck because of bad weather. Because of how dangerous it was, Rick Yem and fellow driver Dave Redman turned around and went back, but Lisa Kelly kept going. She moved the whole load by herself and quickly became the only truck driver in North America to finish every job for the season. It was hard to deny what was shown on the screen. She was the only one who didn't give up when the road got really dangerous. The relationship had clearly blown up, and there was no turning back. Yem's attack after the show shows how deeply castmates can dislike each other when they think producers messed up their edits. There was no talk about it. It was clear that Yem and Kelly had very different ideas and didn't get along. There would be trouble episode after episode. Sometimes they wouldn't even ride together because they didn't want to fight over routes or load duties. The tension was real, and cast comments have shown that what people saw on screen was just as real as what happened in real life. Rick was very strong-willed and energetic, so he didn't like to give in easily, while Lisa was set on not giving up, no matter what. They would never give up. And this was the kind of entertainment that reality TV fans wanted. A place where two strong personalities never quite got along and things got worse over time. There was something he didn't like about Lisa and reality TV in general. He thought they had hurt him. Most of the fights on the show didn't end when the cameras stopped running. This was a hard truth for Lisa to learn. She had a good reputation for being brave and tough, Now she had to defend herself against a bad story told by a former co-worker. Yem's words were direct attacks on her bravery and whole identity. He wasn't the only one on the ice road truck crew who had a grudge against Lisa Kelly, though. Third place goes to Dave Redmond. Both Dave Redmond and Yim shared a trait. They were close friends on the show and said that the makers gave them a bad edit. That's like saying every story needs a bad guy. The bad guy on Ice Road Truckers was played by Dave Redmond in the 5th season. He was a truck driver from Alabama, and when he got to Fairbanks, he seemed sure of himself. He only spent a short time on the Dalton Highway, but he had been in a lot of fights on TV before. David Redmond didn't have to do much to play the bad guy. People had seen him fight with his experienced trainer, Tony Molesky, many times over how he changed gears and how stubborn he was. The arguments weren't like most arguments you hear. Because they were so angry, Tony left Redmond at a Coldfoot truck stop. After everything was said and done, Redmond was fired live on the show because he wasn't working with others. However, Dave Redmond says that the bad guy people saw on the screen was a complete lie. In many interviews after being fired for bad driving and bad behavior toward other truckers, he claimed that the story against him was made up. He said, "They wrote me to be the bad guy on the show, and they also wrote me to get fired." He said in a different interview that they worked hard to make him look bad in Alaska. He told them, "What you see on TV is so fake it's not even real." You may be thinking what Lisa Kelly has to do with this. Things get interesting now that she doesn't. Even though Redmond and Lisa both starred on IRT's Deadliest Toads in India, there is no proof that they were at odds with each other personally or directly. The episode summaries show that they each face their own problems, often on different runs. Lisa had trouble getting along with her neighborhood spotter Tashi, and Dave had problems with drivers who were rude and loaded with too much stuff. Their drama comes from being together and not from fighting with each other. The show's clear protagonist was Lisa, while Dave was played as the bad guy. His mistakes and bad mood on screen only made her professionalism and skill shine through. Rick Yem and Lisa Kelly did not get along very well, and Redmond joined forces with Rick Yem. Two drivers, Yem and Redmond, turned back from the last and most dangerous jet fuel run in the Himalayas, which Lisa had to handle by herself. When they both went on the 2nd season of Deadliest Roads in Bolivia, they really became friends as outsiders fighting against the company. Redmond says that they both quit the show early on, saying that it was because the equipment was dangerous and there were ongoing problems with production. Redmond never really had a problem with Lisa Kelly. He had a bigger issue with the producers, whom he thought had put his image at risk to make the show more interesting for viewers. He lost his way after this, which led to his fight with Lisa Kelly. Even though she tries to be polite in interviews, the way she talks about them makes it clear that things were probably never easy between them. On the other side of the story, Lisa was the hero. Because of this, he felt like he was unintentionally hurt in his fight against the show's creators. This had an effect on Lisa that wasn't direct, but it was still important. In a way, the fact that the show made Redmond the bad driver made her look like the good trucker, which supported her role as the moral center of the show. She didn't have to do much to make this story more interesting, and she never got into direct fights. But she naturally hated him because he was a rival and a monster in the story, so their conflict was mostly made up by other people. Number 2. G.W. Bowles. The next person's story was based around the beautiful, old, and hard world of the Andes Mountains. In Season 2 of IRT's Deadliest Road, this area of Bolivia and Peru was the setting for one of the most interesting partnerships in the show's history. When Rick Yem and Dave Redmond quit early in the season, the show had to find new performers right away. GW was the answer to their problem. Bowl is an experienced Texas truck driver who has driven long distances for decades, but has never been on the notorious death roads. Before he even got on the show, things were starting to go wrong with his match with Lisa Kelly. Bowles was an experienced driver, but that didn't mean he was an experienced person in this new world. Every turn there could cause the ground to give way under the tires. Lisa had already made it through a Himalayan season in India. She knew better than anyone else that in their world, trust was won, not given. Right from the start of their working journey together, there was tension. Lisa was nice and friendly, but she also made it clear that she wasn't ready to give him the keys right away. She knew what was at stake, and that one mistake at the high altitude of Bolivia could kill both of them. The episode of Oxygen Required showed that Lisa put Bowles in the job of a spotter because she still didn't want to let him drive. It wasn't pride that led to this choice. It was a decision to be careful. Bowles stayed in the passenger seat for many weeks while Lisa drove around sharp turns and on roads that were barely wider than their truck tires. His job was to keep an eye out for danger and lead Lisa through the tunnel openings. He was also in charge of the unpredictable flow of buses, motorcycles, and animals in the area. He was used to being in charge of his own rig, so this had to be embarrassing for him, but he didn't try to avoid duty or even complain. Instead, he dealt with things as they came up and learned from them while he waited for his chance to shine. The desert disaster finally had a moment that people will remember. When they were in Peru, the roads were sandy and close to cliffs. One wrong fall or move could send the truck flying into chaos. Lisa wanted to see how well he did, so she gave him the wheel. This wasn't just a move, it was a risk. This was the one moment when both of their lives might have depended on it. The cameras caught the exact moment that GW put his attention on the wheel and really gripped it. Then, as the minutes went by, he was almost off the edge. This scary event reminded us that experience was important, but the roads needed a certain skill. Even though the chances were against him, GW did not give in to the pressure. He got better, and with each mile, Lisa gave him more faith. Over time, this helped them get along better. They were already able to work together when they went through Bolivia's Dead Nun Canyon, a scary stretch of hand-carved tunnels that were only a few inches bigger than their huge load. Together, they were able to cross weak bridges that were about to fall apart from the weight of the truck. They took a group of unpredictable bulls to a festival in the town and got there without any problems. At this point, it was clear that the power battle they used to have between them had changed. What began as a cautious standoff turned into one of the most respectful relationships on the most dangerous roads. GW Lisa showed him how to lead without being pushy, and he showed her how to deal with stress. It became second nature to her to know when to be in charge and when to let go. There was stress and bad blood at the start of this story, but everyone got along by the end. Their story shows how important it is to win trust. It wasn't about big fights or fights caught on camera. There were important choices to be made, and respect had to be earned every step of the way. Getting your partner to trust you was an important part of building a friendship. But it was a whole different story when you had to earn the trust of your bigger competitor and turn that competition into the most important relationship of your career. They were rivals at first because of what the news said about them, but they were able to save their relationship by believing each other. This is how their relationship grew. First, Daryl Ward. At the start of the list, the last driver was almost the same as the first one. One competitor being so helpful in the end is really amazing. That's where it all began. On Manitoba's dangerous winter roads, where Daryl Ward was the most dangerous driver. People in Montana knew the legend to be a dangerous, independent, and charming driver, who didn't mind constantly going up against big companies. He was Lisa Kelly's main rival for many years. They would compete for the same loads and drive on the same risky roads. Most of the time, they would be put against each other just to move the story along. It's safe to say that he was one of Lisa's biggest competitors and a real threat in the ice race. But things changed and went in a different direction in Season 9. Daryl Ward quit his job out of anger and chose to believe in himself. He began his own trucking business from the very beginning. His choice not to go to an old friend or a new hire for a partner was shocking and caught everyone off guard. He looked at his rival. For both of them, this was such a big moment. Lisa's bio on the show says that she jumped at the chance when her friend Daryl Ward offered her a piece of his new business. He didn't just give her a job, he also gave her some control. People in this business had to earn respect, not be given it. This was the greatest act of love. Not only does her biggest rival value her skills, he's also willing to risk his whole living on them. Everyone who watched was shocked when they became partners. It also changed the whole show. People watched the two former foes work together for 2 seasons. Together, they took on new tasks like Alberta's Death Road and built their business one load at a time. Nobody saw their relationship coming, but it was electric and thrilling. They had once used their competitive spirit to fuel their competition, but now it was being used to fuel their shared goal. Having this relationship was a big step forward for both of them, and for Lisa, it was another big accomplishment in her acting career. They went from being enemies to partners, which was a clear answer to all the doubters and critics. When a great character like Daryl Ward became her partner, the bad behavior of figures like Hugh Rowland was no longer seen as useful. They were both having a great time, but it wasn't meant to last. It was a shock and a tragedy when their promising relationship ended in August 2016, right after season 10 finished. A plane crash killed Daryl Ward. Fans of the show and people who work in trucking were saddened by the news. Lisa felt a deep sense of loss over this loss. In an interview, she said she was sad, but it didn't really hit her until she went back to her old home without her partner. She felt even more pushed to get things done since Daryl usually took care of a lot of them. Lisa went back out on the ice in season 11 to remember the memory of her friend. She was also in charge of the business they built together. At first, she did it by herself. Then she started to help Daryl's young son Reno with his schoolwork. She showed him the ropes, just like his dad had faith in her. Things may not have gone well between Lisa Kelly and Daryl Ward at first, but their story had changed. The friendship that began as fierce competition had grown into one of the most interesting, deep, professional, and personal on ice and through Lisa's journey on TV. The world needed that proof. In spite of being on an icy road, it proved that rivals can turn into strong partnerships. Trust is the best way to show respect at the end of the day. Lisa Kelly was able to fight 5 of her biggest enemies, ranging from Hugh Rowland to Rick Yem and Dave Redmond. Each of these fights was different. There were walls she had to break down. Then a rival who was out to hurt her reputation and an enemy in a story she had nothing to do with writing. She was able to leave her mark on the crowd and on history. She was an interesting figure who gave me ideas. In a field where women make up very little of the workforce, she was also a force to be reckoned with. Still, she found her place and showed that being determined doesn't depend on your gender. Many fans saw Lisa Kelly as more than just a truck driver. It was a sign of her strength, toughness, and quiet drive. In the dangerous world of ice road trucking, where even a small mistake could mean disaster, she showed over and over that she could handle the worst situations and still stand strong. Lisa earned the respect and admiration of viewers everywhere she went, whether she was driving through sub-zero blizzards, crossing frozen lakes that cracked and groaned under the weight of her truck, or pushing through whiteouts that could swallow an entire rig. But it wasn't easy living under the constant scrutiny of reality TV. For years, the cameras followed her around and recorded every step she took and words she spoke so that millions of people could see them. They started to feel tired from the long shooting seasons, the fake drama, and the constant pressure to do well. Lisa decided to step away from the TV lights and the constant attention of the public in 2017. She had been in the spotlight for more than 10 years. She went back to her quiet life in Wasilla, Alaska, far from the high-stakes competitions and the noise of truck engines on the ice. She took on a slower beat in Wasilla. Along with her husband Travis Kelly and the animals she loved, she found peace that her busy life on the road could never give her. She gave up the thrill of driving on icy roads for the comfort of her own house, the peace of snowy fields, and the simple pleasure of taking care of her pets. Because she was a truck driver, she had been all over Alaska. She made it over some of the world's toughest and most risky trails. There is the dangerous Dalton Highway, the Himalayas, and the dangerous roads that wind through the Andes. Each road had its own problems. There were sheer cliffside passes, thin mountain air, weather that was hard to predict, and roads that looked like they were ready to destroy any car that crossed them. But these hard physical tests were not the whole story. Behind the scenes, Lisa was dealing with a different kind of danger, the sharp edges of competition and tension between her fellow drivers. The ice roads weren't just places to fight nature. They were also places where people with different personalities, competing, and trying to gain power would meet. Some of her most important rivals seemed set on making things harder for her on the ice than they already were. They were hard, but Lisa dealt with them with the same calm and determination she used on the road. The most important thing about her win wasn't how many miles she drove or how much freight she hauled. It wasn't in the world records she might have broken or the millions of fans she got. Her true memory lies in something deeper, her ability to handle the dangerous terrain of fame and stay grounded and graceful, even when everything was putting too much pressure on her, and to leave when the time was right on her own terms. It takes guts, determination, and honor to go through what Lisa Kelly did. She taught everyone that being strong doesn't just mean being able to handle bad weather. It also means knowing when to back off and keep the peace. She is no longer in front of the camera, but the picture of her driving her truck across frozen lakes with her eyes set on the horizon will always be a reminder of how to handle life's toughest roads with grace and grit. Stay tuned for more videos like this, and don't forget to leave a review and a thumbs up below.